But like Hillary said, my name is Matt Kozlowski. I am the current campaign administrator for Jill Stein's exploratory race. And last time around for Jill Stein's campaign run, I was the director of finance and information. So I was in charge of all of the matching fund stuff, all of our FEC compliance, a bunch of our fundraising, and all kinds of stuff. And just one other quick piece about me, I currently serve as the chair of our local party, which is Progressive Dane. It's not actually a Green-affiliated party, but it's a progressive party here in Madison, Wisconsin. And so I've worked on more local races than I can probably count at this point. I know it's more than 40. And currently I am working on 2 mayoral races, 1 school board race, and 5 alder races. So all sorts of fun happening in Madison right now. But so what we're going to cover today here is early campaign development. So this is everything from you've decided to run to, you are looking at the kinds of things you need to do to get ready for compliance and staying in with the rules, recruiting your campaign team, preparing for like a kickoff and launching your campaign. And then I'll also just do a quick overview of making a campaign plan and stuff like that. So if I'm going too fast or anything, just feel free to chime in. I'll be sure to leave plenty of room for questions at the end too, so we'll go through it from there. But other than that, so again, the things I'm going to cover is just the logistics of launching a campaign, what you need to have ready, stuff like that. I'll also cover compliance rules, filing, stuff that you'll probably have to watch out for and things to consider, some of the other basics that you'll want in place. Then I'll jump into building your team, defining the roles that you'll want for your campaign, and recruiting your team members themselves. And then I'll go into the actual launching of your campaign and your kickoff event. And then from there, we'll talk about campaign planning. But first, startup logistics. So the first thing that I put on with everyone, because it's probably the most boring part, but it's the thing that trips up so many candidates everywhere, is just filing the necessary paperwork for everything. Every state has different rules, and every level of government has different rules. But the first thing I tell any candidate that's considering running for office at any level is immediately go talk to your filing agency. So if you're running for city council, that's probably your city clerk. If you're running for Congress, it might be a state-based agency like in Minnesota, for instance, where congressional candidates register with the state in addition to the FEC. Or it might be the Federal Elections Commission or whatever it is, if you have a state elections board, something like that. The reason I tell people to do that right away is you don't want to run afoul of any of the rules. Here in Madison, for instance, if a candidate starts out telling people, hey, I'm running for alder, will you sign up to be a part of my campaign team? If they haven't filed that declaration of candidacy, someone can file an elections complaint against them for breaking the rules, and that never ends well for anyone. So that's the first step I give everyone is go talk to whoever is in charge of elections in your state or your municipality. And some of the other things that will come with that are like campaign finance forms. So these will be things that like how are you starting your campaign off, where's your money held, basic stuff like that. Some of it will be the declaration of candidacy, and usually this is a notarized form that says I, so-and-so, am running for office. And here's, my campaign information. Then the other thing is just like economic interest disclosure. Some states require it before you do any campaigning. You have to disclose things. It's usually used for ethics ordinances and stuff. That's less common at the local level, but I put it on there anyways. Watch out for it. You might need it. Signatures, a lot of states have a signature threshold for getting on the ballot unless you have a ballot access line through a party. For municipal elections, at least in Wisconsin and any other state where they're nonpartisan, there will be some kind of signature requirement, and that's for getting on the ballot. And then opening your bank account, I just put that in there because why not? The other thing is understanding the rules. So at the same time as you're talking to your clerk to file paperwork or your filing agency, just get a quick hit on what the donation limits are, your expenditure rules. Are there any clean campaign rules in your area? Are you not allowed to run PAC ads? Stuff like that. These are just the early questions to consider. That's not the fun stuff that we're going to talk about tonight. But if you do have questions about any of that, at the bottom of all the slides here, I've put my contact information. Feel free, no matter where you are, I've worked on campaigns in plenty of states. If you have questions about compliance or legal stuff, feel free to send them my way. And if I don't know an answer, I probably know someone you can talk to about it. But now getting into some of the more fun stuff. So the basics that any campaign should have when you're starting off. The first thing you should do is identify who your constituents are, who you're running to represent. Get a good sense of your district and all this stuff. And then start building what we call your universes. And this is a term that you'll hear a lot from the Democrats. It's a handy term, so I like to use it anyways. The idea is that you have your constituents at the largest level. That's anyone that lives in the district you're running to represent. But below that, you have the people that actually register to vote, or potential people that could register to vote, or people you're targeting of voter age. And that's what we label as the constituent universe. People that are voters or you are going to try to recruit to be voters. This is the basics of who you're going to contact throughout the course of your campaign. Below that is your mailing universe. Who can you contact? Who can you send mail to if that's a strategy that works in your area? And then the same thing with doors universe. Where are the addresses that you can actually knock if doing doors is possible? If you're running for Congress, doing for doors is a little bit harder. But if you're running for city alder, for instance, or for city council, it's probable that you'll go through and knock all the doors in your district. Here in Madison, I'll keep using Madison as an example because it's what I know best. Our candidates that run for city council knock every door in their district at least 3 times before election day. Sounds like a daunting task, but that's the kind of thing you'll want to have a universe for and know how many contacts you'll have to make and how many people you'll be talking to. So getting that information down on paper is really handy so you have a sense of what you're doing. And when I get to the campaign planning section at the end, I'll have a little more about that. But the next thing is some of the visibility items, the stuff that you're going to need so people know you're campaigning and so people know, about you and why you're running and have ways of getting in touch with you. So those are the things like your website. For websites, I always recommend that candidates use Nation Builder, which I'm such a nerd when it comes to Nation Builder that I have a bumper sticker on my laptop for that. But it's a really handy tool that wraps together your website and your database, and it does your voter data, it does your email communications, all kinds of things. A lot of the state parties have been converting to Nation Builder, and I believe GPUS has it all set up. For the Jill Stein campaign, that's what we use. But you'll want to have, no matter what it is, a website. You'll want to have your social media set up. You'll want to have your graphics or your logos or whatever you're going to use. And you'll want some basic literature about who you are and why you're running. And these are things that you want as soon as possible in your campaign because these are the items that you're going to use from everything you're doing, whether it's talking to some random voter on the street corner while you're getting signatures, to when you're asking for endorsements or recruiting volunteers. Anything you're going to do, you can point people that way. So that's the first of those. The next thing, moving on from there, the next thing is to start thinking about your campaign team and who you're going to bring in to help you win whatever race you're running. So the first thing I always do with building a team is just figure out what your needs are as a campaign. And there's some good questions you can ask yourself for that. Like the basic is, what roles will you need? That will vary widely depending on what you're running for. But if you're running for some very, very small office where there's not a whole lot of work, maybe all you need is you, your campaign manager, and a volunteer coordinator. But if it's something larger, you're going to need people to run a whole bunch of different tasks. So the second question you can ask is, how big does your team need to be? Are you, the same thing as what I was saying before, are you going to need 2 people or are you going to need 10? Are you going to have paid staff? This is always an important question to ask yourself at the beginning because it'll help you with figuring out how you're going to recruit people and how you're going to get people involved in the team. And there's all sorts of other compliance stuff that comes up with that. So you'll want to have an answer to that right away. How are you going to organize your team? Is it going to be that the candidate is in charge of coordinating all the different roles? Is it that your campaign manager is in charge of coordinating roles? Who reports to who? All kinds of stuff like that. Oops, and I forgot one other thing about, well, I'll get back to that later. Some of the common campaign roles that candidates have at basically all levels is, the campaign manager. So your campaign manager is someone that is basically the master of all tasks. This is the person whose job is to keep as many things off of the candidate's plate as possible. So in alder races, for instance, or city council races here in Madison, we say that the candidate should only be knocking doors, talking to voters, calling for fundraising, and talking to the press. Anything outside of those four things is someone else's job, and they shouldn't be doing it. So the campaign manager's job is to say, nope, candidate, that's not your thing. You should be doing something else right now. I'll find someone to take care of that. And they'll also do other big picture stuff like planning and all sorts of stuff like that. In addition, the campaign manager is usually a volunteer coordinator. This person is just responsible for recruiting volunteers and making sure that there's enough people to take on all the tasks that you're going to need. And then also working with those volunteers to make sure that they're having a good experience and getting the information they need and resources they need and all kinds of stuff like that. From there, there's almost always someone that's in charge of your website and your social media. That person is kind of a key role these days in that they end up being some kind of a hub within the campaign team for just knowing what's going on everywhere. Right now I'm working on a mayoral race, and I'm the campaign manager, but I laugh, more people end up contacting my web person to ask what's going on right now than call me to ask what's going on. Just because the web person has to be posting events on the website and posting things on social media and stuff like that. So that role is kind of growing these days, and it's kind of fun. But anyways, from there, there's also a press director in some cases, depending on how large the district is you're running for. This person is a great role to have for lessening some of the candidates' time talking to the press. So this person can do media pitching for events and try to recruit people to cover what the candidate's doing. They can help do some of the coordination of scheduling interviews and all kinds of stuff like that. Basically anything that doesn't involve the candidate talking directly to the press. And it's also nice because it gives a sense of importance to your campaign. Oh, wow, that they've got such a team that they've got one person who coordinates the press. Which we already have enough of a time as Greens trying to get press coverage for our stuff. Having that little extra layer of pomp and circumstance sometimes helps. If the press director isn't available or there isn't someone in that role, usually the campaign manager will do a lot of those tasks. Next is finance and compliance. So this person typically is around to make sure that we're recording donations properly. We're following all the filing rules and all the other stuff that goes from there. They're responsible for giving reports to the candidate and to the campaign manager, and also helping with budgeting and stuff like that. In addition to that, though, a lot of times the finance director or compliance director, whatever you want to call it, ends up being a fundraising person and helps assemble call lists for candidates and helps craft email appeals and do all kinds of other handy stuff. Just because, right now, for instance, with the Jill Stein campaign, there's all sorts of rules that we have to be following. So at the end of the day, I almost end up taking over a large chunk of our email blasts just to make sure that we don't have anything in there we're not supposed to have to. Someone else usually writes them. We've got great people for Jill Stein right now. But so that's that person. The next is the actual treasurer. Now, this is an interesting distinction that I think not a lot of people are necessarily familiar with. Oftentimes campaigns will have a treasurer that's like a known commodity in the community, someone who's like a labor activist or an environmental activist, a name that'll mean something that you can put on your paid for and authorized taglines wherever you post stuff. So at the bottom of your literature, it says paid for and authorized by yada yada for Congress, Joe organizer for or treasurer. That person might not actually be the person who does all the finance work. But you want to have someone on there that has a strong and valuable name. So there's a little bit of a distinction there between the two. It's one that I get a lot of questions on why do you do that and how does that work and stuff like that. I'll say save the questions on that for the end and I'll explain more. Otherwise, it's probably just a common sense like no duh thing. From there's also a field director. Typically, this is the person, if it's like a city council race, this is the person who's in charge of cutting the actual turfs where the candidate's going to go for knocking doors. If this is someone that's, a statewide campaign, it's usually someone who will help coordinate volunteer shifts around the state and figure out who's going to talk to voters where and setting up phone banks and all sorts of stuff like that. And then there's also the spot for just other roles. Every campaign kind of takes on a life of its own. Everyone has different strengths and weaknesses. Everyone has different experience. And so there's always some creative combination of things that you'll end up with for different campaign roles. One interesting example I have right now is in Wisconsin, there are just way too many organizations that do endorsements for candidates. I mean, there's everything from labor organizations to environmental groups to, different activists in the community. And almost all of them in our area do questionnaires. And so rather than having our candidate suffer through probably 5 questionnaires a week, give or take, for the entirety of the campaign, we recruited someone for this particular race that I'm working on now to just handle the questionnaires. So basically what their job is, they get the questionnaire out of the email or out of the mailbox. They fill it out and do all the logistics around it, and then bring it back to the candidate for their approval on the answers. And it's actually a really handy role, but it's not one that's common to all the other races. The big thing with defining your roles and coming up with that is figure out a mix that works well for you, and we'll make sure things get done. And I see I have a chat. I'm having a hard time getting to the chat, so I apologize. Oh, can people still hear me?
Yes,
Yes, I hear you.
Okay. I saw Hillary had posted a message that she couldn't hear me. But anyways, well, I'll keep moving then. If others can't hear me, just type it in that little chat window if you're online, or just chime in, I guess. But so from there, the next thing is just recruiting your team. A couple things to consider with recruitment is, I guess I'll put it this way. One of the biggest questions I get from candidates is, should I be prioritizing new people who have not been involved in campaigns, or should I be prioritizing those people who have been around for forever and have run more campaigns than anyone else? It's an interesting question for us as Greens, especially because we need to constantly be growing and expanding the movement and bringing in new people and new energy. But at the same time, if we only do that, we're kind of handicapping ourselves because we don't have the people that know how to do this from day in and day out. They've done it a million times and just jump in and go. So typically what I recommend is if you're going to have some new person coming in as a volunteer, some new person coming in as a volunteer and running something, you should always have a backup for that person, someone that's been in that role before or understands that role, and have them shadow that person or give backup in some other way. Another principle to consider is just depth chart. In addition to having people shadow and backup for new volunteers, I like to have 2 people in every role whenever possible. So that way if someone gets sick or someone, heavens forbid, gets hit by a bus or something crazy like that, you've got someone ready to step into that role right away and take it over and keep going. Oftentimes in campaigns you just don't have time to rebuild things from scratch for any role. and so having a second person there ready to step in is just a great backup measure. So next is just places you can go for recruiting your team. The obvious answer is from the party. So for people that are in areas where we have developed green parties and we have a lot of experience running campaigns, you can almost always just go to the party and say, hey, who do you have in my area? Or if you're really involved in the party, I'm sure you know others that run campaigns and do stuff like that. Another place that works well is actually nonprofit leaders or people that work in nonprofit communities. Because of the work that we do as Greens, we just usually know a lot of people that come from that world. And even though they don't directly come from campaigning, oftentimes people that work with nonprofits will have the same set of transferable skills that will work well for what you're doing. So going to them is a good second place. A third place is community activists. This is actually sometimes a better spot to go than nonprofits, just because community activists are a little bit more in the trenches with what's happening in their community. A lot of us are activists and organizers outside of what we're doing here, but that would be another place to go, is look at the organizations that support the work and support the things that you're gunning for in your area and ask them to be a part of your team. And then the next thing is just personal contacts. Who do you know that, doesn't necessarily have experience running campaigns, but is someone you trust and someone you know you can work with? I, funny enough, will run into more campaigns that have just a bunch of friends of the candidate running the show than anything else, than the experienced campaigners or the party operatives or stuff like that. Right now with my school board race, my finance person, my treasurer, is someone who has literally never done anything with finance or with running the treasury of a campaign. But it's working well because they're very responsive and they work well with the candidate, so I guess you can't complain. I think that's it. Yep. So that's all on campaign team. There's a lot of other questions about communication and stuff like that. The other things that I just realized I forgot to put in there is one big question to ask yourself is, how is the team going to communicate? Everyone has different preferences for, like, oh, I prefer to be texted, or, oh, I like to do things over email, or I have to meet in person. Answering that question for yourself early on will spare you a lot of trouble from people complaining later on about contacts and stuff like that. So consider how people will communicate as another function of starting up. Now, the next thing is launching your campaign. Most campaigns from the congressional level down through the city council level will launch with some kind of a kickoff event, some kind of a big either fundraiser or something else. Before you get to that, there's a couple things you'll want to do. The first thing is just plan the event itself. And I'm going to switch over here and show you just an example. This is a grid for planning an event that I have for Progressive Dane. This is planning our annual meeting, I think is what this is. Yeah. So the place that you'll want to start is at the very end of your event. So the day of the event is where I always start. And I just pick whatever our goals are for the event itself. So for this particular one, we said that we were going to have 15 workshops at this annual meeting. We were going to have 14 speakers that were going to show up. We knew we were going to put up how many posters in the area for it. We were going to get this many people to RSVP, and somewhere I had attendees goal, but apparently it's not in here. And you start from your goal and work your way backwards from there. Well, I know, for instance, I want to put up 125 posters. So in order to get that done by the day of the event, I need to put them up, how many days beforehand. And if I'm going to put them up how many days beforehand, I'm going to need to print them. And if I'm going to print them, I'm going to need to design them. And keep working your way backwards as far as it takes to get whatever goals and stuff is there. I apologize if everyone's done backwards planning before, and this is just annoying, but I like to just point it out as a tactic because it works amazingly well for planning anything. And I can send, by the way, too, if anyone wants any of the materials I have here today when I'm presenting, I can send them all to you. Just let me know. Send me an email at the bottom there. But I would create a plan like this for your kickoff event. Think about what your goals are. Think about what kinds of other things you're going to want to have at the event and everything else. But, yeah, anyways. So that's just my little treatise on backwards planning. The next thing that comes with that is obviously setting your goals, figure out what you're going for, and everything else. Before I get to the event itself, I'm glad I looked back at this presentation. There's a couple things that you're definitely going to need to have done before you actually launch your campaign. And those are those campaign basics that we talked about before. That's the things like your website. You have to have a website before you have a kickoff event. Otherwise, if reporters or if supporters in your area try to find out more information about you, they're going to go, oh, yeah, so I heard that guy's running for Congress. Oh, I want to find out more about him. They Google you, and they find nothing, and that's like the last they hear of you for a little while. You lose out on contacts. The same thing goes for social media. Absolutely do that before you launch your campaign and have your kickoff meeting or your kickoff event. And the same thing goes for all the compliance rules and filings and stuff like that. Get all that stuff done first. And then the only other thing that goes with that is have the basics of your team assembled before you launch your campaign. Not only because you're going to want to have those people to help you plan the kickoff event itself, but also because you're going to want those people to help at the event. You're going to want those people to help with the planning process that goes up to it for your overall campaign. And you're going to want to have a sense of what your organization is going to be before the masses start coming to you and saying, how can I get involved? So get those things done before you get into your campaign kickoff. Now I'll just jump ahead in time to the actual kickoff event itself. So some of the things to ask yourself is what is this event going to be? The most common one is a fundraiser where you'll have like the candidate will recruit some kind of guest speaker, whether it's an elected official in your area or an activist or a neighborhood leader, something like that. Recruit that person to be a guest speaker and then put out invitations saying, join Matt Kozlowski while he runs for President of the United States with guest speaker Noam Chomsky. And then make it a fundraising event and, expected donation, suggested donation, $50 at the door. The reason a fundraiser is the most common is because it's the easiest way to raise money for the rest of the campaign. So go for it from there. Why not just capitalize on it at the beginning? But some alternatives that I've seen work well in the past are a press event. Some candidates will just have a big press conference on the steps of the Capitol building or something like that and recruit as many media outlets to cover the event as possible. And then there'll usually be some kind of a spin-off event from that. So in order to make it successful, usually you'll have like some kind of a meet and greet across the street or something like that. But a press event works well. Another thing is just the basic supporter meet and greet. This one actually works well in races where big money is going to be a problem for you. So if you're running up against some very, very corporatist Democrat or some very, very big money-backed conservative, having the supporter meet and greet as like a story for why you're running. I'm not running to raise a whole bunch of money for this campaign. I'm running to talk to all of you and learn about what issues you care about and find out how we can make our community better. It makes such a good story when, a couple weeks later your opponent launches and has this, $10,000 a plate dinner to launch their campaign candidacy. So that's just another alternative model to go off of. And there's any number of others. I mean, none of us have come up with every idea there is for events with campaigns. I would encourage people to just be creative and think about what gets you the maximum support in your area and will do something that's most effective for for your campaign itself. So that's the event itself. After the event, I cannot stress this enough, you have to get stuff set up for the day after your event, at least 2 days before the event itself. So the things that you'll need to do is like your follow-ups. At the event itself, people are going to come up to you and say, hey, I want to donate to your campaign. How can I do that? If you don't have like a donation form set up or some kind of an envelope that you can send with them, it's like impossible to play catch up later on. So getting that stuff done before the event itself is really important. People are going to come up to you and say, hey, I want to be on your campaign team. I've worked as a volunteer for this many races. If you don't have a system set up beforehand for capturing those people or for figuring out what you need and plugging them in, you're going to struggle at the day of the event itself. Same thing goes with just regular volunteers. The other thing is endorsements. What happens, at least here in Madison, is other elected officials in the area will attend kickoff events for different candidates, listen to the speeches that they give, and then make a decision right there about whether or not they're going to endorse that candidate. So, the big thing is having some states, for instance, you have to get a signed statement if you're going to list an endorsement. Minnesota apparently is one of those states, which I didn't know until the Andy Dawkins race. But just find out if there's anything like that. But other than that, capture the contact information. Oh, you want to endorse me? Here, great. Give me your business card, or here's my business card, or something like that, so that you can follow up with them about using it. Oh, and my screen froze. There we go. And just any other things. At these events, especially for Jill last time, it's just chaos. People will come up to you with really random questions about what's your stance on Israel-Palestine, and you can't just respond to them even if you're running for city council. Well, it doesn't really matter, or I don't know. Or if you're going to answer I don't know, you better have a good follow-up for how you're going to answer that question. So just be prepared for whatever random other things happen and follow up with those people as quickly as possible. And that's all I have on the event itself. There's probably any number of other things. I'm actually not the most skilled event planner, so there might be things that I've missed, but feel free to bring things up in the Q&A period. But the last thing I want to talk about here today is campaign planning itself and building a campaign plan. Things to include. So I'm going to show you just some sample materials now. So this is a campaign plan from one of, I'm going to make that bigger so people can actually see it. From one of my county board races here in town, Leland Pan, people might actually recognize that name. He spoke at the national convention, I think it was 2012. It was either 2011 or 2012. Leland is on the county board here in Dane County and is one of the youngest elected officials in the Green Party. Actually, I think he is the youngest elected official in the Green Party. And I worked on his campaign here in town. But so when we were running him, we had a whole plan assembled from the very get-go of how we were going to do the whole thing start to finish. So you can see some of the things that are included here is just an overview of his overall district, a little bit about how we were going to message his campaign, some notes about the political landscape here in Dane County, who are the other organizations, stuff like that, all the way down. I'll go through them real quick. So you can see like district overview. One of the best things you can do in starting off and deciding about your voter universe is just look at the number of eligible voters you have, what's their demographic breakdown, are their political affiliations more liberal or more conservative, what's the income levels, all that kind of useful demographic information. The other thing is to look at past elections in that district, get that information in this plan, talk about some of the challenges, all kinds of stuff like that. You can break down precincts. Sorry, I'm kind of rambling here trying to think of what was useful. Here we go. The candidate box is one of the things that I always tell people to go for right away. A candidate box is basically how are you going to talk about your campaign and how is your opponent going to talk about your campaign. So the box is broken into 4 parts for a two-way race. What is your candidate going to say about themselves? what is your candidate going to say about their opponent, what is your opponent probably going to say about your candidate, and what is your opponent probably going to say about themselves. Getting that charted out immediately will help you think about how you're going to respond to the things your opponent's going to say, and it'll help you come up with stuff that will be smart in relation to what your opponent might say about you. And you can sometimes use their messaging against them and do all kinds of stuff. So you can see for Leland here, his opponent was very keen on the fact that Leland is very immature, he's too young, he's one of those crazy radicals who's just going to throw everything against the wall. So we decided to have Leland talk about himself as someone who was collaborative, someone who was passionate, someone who was very hardworking, and someone who had strong principles about stuff like that. And those kinds of things were decided after we discovered, oh yeah, Chris is really going to come out there and hit him for being young. So what can we do to respond to that? Let's see. Other interesting stuff is like budget and all sorts of stuff. I don't really want to get too much into that right now, just because we don't have enough time to really talk about a campaign budget and stuff. Hillary can feel free to invite me back. I can do an hour on budgeting for campaigns because I've done it way too many times. But all this kind of stuff should go into your campaign plan and should be charted out as early as possible. And the last thing I'll say about campaign plans is they should always be living and breathing documents. This is something that you should update every week as you do stuff, as you change tactics, as you do any number of other things, just because you never really know like who you're going to have to send information to quickly or who's going to drop off of the campaign team all of a sudden and have all these things that need to get done, and you never know what kind of conversations you'll have that will change a week later. So put it on paper, keep it on paper, and update it all the time. And other than that, the only other things I have here, we don't need to go through them. It's just some samples of literature and mailers and stuff that we've done in the past, invites to events, all kinds of nice, like, nifty graphics that we've used. I don't know if anyone wants these. I can include them in the packet of stuff I send out afterwards, or I'll send to Hillary to send out. But just some useful stuff when you're crafting your logo and starting off. But other than that, I think I'll cut it off there so I allow enough time for questions. I apologize if I went through that too quickly. I'm glad it's recorded so people can at least get the recording from there. And again, my contact info is at the bottom of the slide here. You can reach me at admin@prodane.org, or my phone number is 715-571-1577. And with that, I will open us up to questions.
Wow. I'm quite impressed. So, yeah, let's hear from folks. Matt clearly has a lot of great experience and knowledge, so let's tap into it. Remember to take yourself off mute in order to ask a question.
Excellent. I wasn't clear if this presentation was going to be available to us in some form we can review later. Is that something that can be mailed to us, for instance?
So Matt prepared a PowerPoint, and I'm happy to email it out to everyone. And if you need me to snail mail it, I can do that too.
Yeah, email would be fine for me. I found the list fairly useful, but I found I was scribbling, trying to keep up more than I was getting as much out of it if I had known in advance that I might get a copy of this. I did like the list. I especially liked the points about how much you have to do before you tell anyone you're doing anything. I've run enough campaigns to know that once you start running, it's hard to go back and start running again.
Yeah, that's a pretty common problem.
Before you get ready.
Yeah, that's a pretty common problem, and that's why I like to stress that any time I talk to people about running is I know candidates especially get really excited about the fact that they're about to launch this big campaign and get into office and make big progressive change and green change. But if you don't stop and get stuff together and just plan it out beforehand, I swear you will never be able to catch back up. And that's what we're trying to do with the Jill Stein campaign this time. So.
Yeah, well, I think you made the point well. I just wanted to collect the notes in more text and less scribble.
Sorry about that. I'm always too quick.
Yep.
Yeah,
Well,
and also for future reference, if you join the call via the computer versus just your phone, then you would have actually seen the presentation in real time.
I saw it in real time. I just wasn't confident I had access to it. Can I save that file on the screen?
Yes. Yeah, he'll email it to me, and I'll send it out to the group.
Okay.
All right. Other questions?
Thank you.
Yep, thank you. I guess I just did so well, there's no other questions. There's also, if anyone has other topics they want me to go back and recover, I would be glad to go back and revisit some stuff or go in more detail.
Yeah. So, Matt, here's a question that I think a lot of folks, who might be on this call might be thinking, and I can imagine some local candidates here in Philly who are just like, wow, all of what he says makes a lot of sense, and it is a lot of work. I don't think I have the time to do this. Well, I don't really know 7 people who can all form my committee, who can play all these various roles. And sort of feeling like, yes, I know intellectually I need to do all that, but I don't know that I actually can. And so what's your advice in terms of just, getting started, trying to motivate people to take on some of these roles? Because I think a lot of green campaigns flounder with, great aspirations, but they can't sort of execute. Just even your backwards planning is very, very detailed, and for many candidates and other Greens that I know would be, they would just get so lost in the weeds on that they wouldn't actually plan the event.
Yeah. So the biggest piece of advice I have for people is don't panic. It seems like there's a lot of stuff to get done at any point in a campaign, and it's true. I mean, every campaign is a scramble. But the big thing is first stop, take a deep breath. You will have time to catch up on stuff later, so recollect yourself before you do anything else. And then recognize that you most likely do have support wherever you are. It's easy to say at the onset, oh my God, there's no way I can recruit 7 people. There's no way I can get all that done. I promise you, you will be surprised at the number of people that will want to support you when you're running for office. So, for instance, with Anna Moffett, who's my school board candidate here in Madison, she wasn't really politically connected when she came into it. She was panicking, thinking, there's no way I'll be able to get all this stuff done. Who could I possibly get as a campaign manager? And then immediately after that, she just went and talked to a couple friends. She talked to a couple other supporters in her area and realized, oh, shoot, that's not true. I have this family member who's run for office before. I've got this friend who knows someone. I've got, these people that work with the party and all kinds of stuff like that. So the biggest mistake that I see with candidates is recognizing the networks that they do have. Everyone has big groups of friends who are experienced. And if nothing else, go to the party in your area or go to a supportive organization in your area that works on similar issues and just ask, hey, I'm thinking about running for this office. What do you think? So that's the first thing. And then the technical bits with, like, detailed planning and with covering, like, graphic design, for instance, or compliance and finance, it's often tricky because it's hard to invent the wheel from that all over again when it's such specialized roles. The other thing that I recommend candidates do when they're first starting off is go and talk to some other people that are already in elected office in your area and ask them just what it was like running for office. Even though here in Madison, I'll give you the background to this. So Madison is still a 2-party system. Funny enough, it's just the progressives and the Democrats. Even though we're always at the Democrats' throats about, the terrible corporate welfare that they put on us at the local level, I still will send my new candidates to some of the Democrat elected officials on city council and say, just talk to them about what running was like for them. And more often than not, those other candidates, even if they're not going to support you in your race, will tell you, hey, I found this really great person. You should talk to them about, how this worked out. I found that this was really easy, even though I thought it was going to be hard, and all kinds of stuff like that. So to sum it up, it's recognize the networks that you have in your own community or within yourself. Don't panic whenever things get stressful and whenever you're worried that you're not going to be able to do it. Take a breath. And then the third thing is just talk to other people who have done this same thing, people who have run for office or people who are in office. Did that kind of answer your question, Hillary?
Yeah, that's helpful.
One of the techniques we use here in Connecticut is to try to find people who are not running this year who hold elective office. They're under less pressure, and they can often be more generous with their support and time and hints. People who are considering running at the same time you are have the same troubles you do and are competing for the same supporters and resources and donations. And so it often works much better for us to have the people who are not running during this year's election partner some with the ones who are. It just doesn't make much sense for all the candidates and everyone else who's excited about this year to go out and bash heads when there are commerce who aren't up for election this year.
Yeah, and the other part that comes with it, that's a great point. And the other part that comes with it, too, is I would say don't be afraid to challenge the paradigm of your community. When I came into becoming the chair of the Progressive Party here in town, everyone told me there's no point in even talking to the Democrats or the Republicans. They're just going to be a waste of your time and don't bother. And I've found that because I send so many of my candidates to talk to them and because we've become such a player in local politics, that we build at least some relationship in terms of, hey, I understand, let me work with your candidates, or hey, I like the issues you like, and stuff like that. Don't be afraid of, I know the Democrats suck, or I know the Republicans are terrible, so I'm not going to talk to them.
I would concur. In our neighborhood, we have 4 parties, and although one of the major parties pretty much assumes they run town, all the other parties collaborate and talk to each other. They don't share the same policy opinions, but they remain cordial, and people drift between those minor parties. Republicans are a minor party, the Greens, and so is a second conservative party.
Cool.
Oh yeah. It just makes sense to cooperate with other people. If you get elected, you're going to have to.
Yeah. Any other questions then for me? I've got a few extra minutes here. If folks want to stick around, I'm glad to talk about anything else. Well, all right then. So I'll send all of my materials to Hillary so that she can distribute them. Again, if you have any questions for me, don't hesitate. I get a lot of really random emails and random phone calls out of the blue. Just give me a couple days to get back to you because I'm in the depths of campaign season right now. But thank you all. I'm glad for the opportunity to talk about campaigns.
Thank you.
Great. And thank you, everyone, for joining. We will be sending out this recording along with Matt's PowerPoint and his other documents to everyone. Everyone who RSVP'd is also going to be added to our webinar listserv. And just be on the lookout for emails about next month's call. Usually it's the 3rd or the 4th Tuesday of the month. And that's it. So thank you, everyone, and good luck and happy campaigning.
Thanks, Hillary.
Thank you, Hillary.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank y'all so much.